Okay, and he did. And we are live, ladies and gentlemen, on a Friday. Hey, hey, hey. Hello to you and yours, and welcome to it. This is called Oram Pop in Chats, and the feature is called It's a Rap. It comes to you every Friday, just around midday. We wrap up all the conversations for the week with your favorite, who are doing amazing things wherever they are. Well, like I said, it's a good morning, and today we are coming in the morning, a little bit earlier than usual, 9 o'clock, and it's because we are hosting. Can I say the best in the business, and that's why we changed time. But thank you so much for making time for us. Thank you so much for waking up with us. I'm sure you're just getting into the office, you're about to settle down, and you have your laptop or your screen lit up with etc. Thank you so much for doing that. We are live on Oran Pocket's Facebook page, also on Twitter. It is at n_health. Please hashtag it's a rep. We are also on YouTube. On our YouTube channel, it is at Oran Pop. And find us on Instagram, it is at PopIn. Also, www.popin.org gives you the behind the scenes. Well, my name is Nkosi, and behind the scenes, making sure all things run smoothly, that we are sound, and that we are sailing. It is my super producer. Call him super producer because he's the brains behind this. His name is Phaleng. Thank you so much, Happy. But my guest today is Patrick Miller, all the way from Zimbabwe. Good morning, Patrick. How are you doing?
Good morning, V, and thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this session. So
I'm
yeah,
excited that you
let's
make
begin.
time. I've been preparing for it for quite a while. And we got the memo, I think about a week ago, because Happy is that efficient. Sent us and said, guys,
Yes.
on Friday, this is
Mhm.
like this. So I've been looking forward to it since the week. But let me just quickly introduce you so that I give the audience a bit of a background of who you are. Well, their name is Patrick Miller. He's a Zimbabwean public advocate, consultant, researcher, playwright, playwright rather, and writer and a gamer. Patrick has over a decade of experience in the arts, has a bachelor's degree in theater arts from the University of Zimbabwe, and a master's degree in public advocacy and activism that is from the National University of Ireland, Galway. He is currently focused on creating and curating cross-culture cooperation and understanding through video gaming. That's who he is. If you have questions for him, please make sure that you send them through on our comment section below, or just tap on the screen, share some love. I know the love will not be going to me; it will be directly to Patrick, but it's fine. As he still the spotlight. Patrick, like I said, thank you so much for your time. I do say the best in the game because every time when I read somebody's bio and then it says advocate, I know that I'm in for a good chat. Let's just jump straight into it. Our topics today are, a variety of what is happening in Africa, touching a little bit on pride and some of the work that you have done. But let's start with the headline that says that really touches on Zambia, where the government calls for a witch hunt against the LGBTQI plus community. My question is, will we ever get to see, the people of Zambia just as it is the people of the African continent, deserving of opportunities to see humanities beyond homosexuality? Or should we just forget about that idea?
It is. I would want to be positive and say that
Yeah.
at some point we will get to that where we get to then see not only just the people of Zambia but Africans, being us being seen as first and foremost Africans before we start breaking down all of those. Okay, who is attracted to who and all of those things, and unfortunately, I think I'm losing hope in terms of how certain things are going. And I don't want to play to say like, devil's advocate or whatever, but you
Yeah.
know the Zambia does see itself as, quote unquote, according to their constitution, if I'm not mistaken, a Christian country. So they have
Mhm.
values that they want
Yeah.
to impose, to say like, as a nation, this is what they are pushing or going for, although that then puts every other person that is not a Christian at a disservice. Because my
Mhm.
question is, for some of us who don't profess to be Christian, where do we fall, or where are
Yeah.
the Zambians that are not Christian, what is happening to them, and all of that, like where do they fit in the national narrative, because
Mm,
they are there and they are
mm,
Zambian, and they also deserve the same protections that every other Zambian is going through. But unfortunately, I can't really speak as
yeah.
an expert because I'm not on the ground. I'm not in the country. I'm not Zambian, so I can just
Mm,
speak from what I'm seeing from my end, which might not be the full picture, because once you are in the midst of certain things, that's when you can really see. But it's
yeah.
it's
Yes,
disheartening
exactly.
because
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
Zambia is not living in isolation. What happens there can have effect on every other thing that then happens in the region. Let's say,
Yeah.
for example, we are in the SADC region. So everything that happens in the countries that are
Mhm.
in the SADC regions will have an effect on their neighbor. And as Zimbabwe, we are,
Yeah.
neighbors with Zambia. So what happens there will then
Mhm.
also ripple into our own nation. So it is troublesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I want us, you are in Zimbabwe, and I wanted to bring it back home to you and
Hmm.
say, perhaps maybe, do you think that in terms of similarities, what would be similar in terms of how the government then treats the LGBTQI plus our community, when you compare
Hmm.
Zimbabwe and you compare maybe a place like Zambia?
Hmm.
Are there similarities, perhaps?
To some extent, I must acknowledge that the new dispensation that the country is in, or the Second Republic, as they are commonly known, to an extent, they have been making some
Mm,
strides, or at least some efforts. Whether it, because now I guess the argument will be, is it real or is it performative? But I guess time will tell in terms of like what it is that they're trying to do, because at least there has been a shift, publicly speaking, in terms of
yeah.
policy wise, from how it was before 2017, in terms of like
Mhm,
that dramatic shift of power that happened in my country in
mhm,
2017. There has been a
mhm.
shift in terms of like some of the things that come through politicians, in public spaces, where it's no longer just the gays are this and that and all of that. What we had during the era of the late Robert Mugabe, where you knew from the get go that at some point in his speeches, he would just, attack the queer community, whether there is reason to or not. You just expected it. But at least the current president of my country, publicly has made some statements that we might be hopeful to say, where it's like, okay, fair and fine, I will adhere to what the constitution says, because there's certain things that the constitution is quiet on, where at least
Mhm.
we can then have means to navigate some certain things. And he was like, for those that then are trying to push for certain changes, they're going to have to advocate for those
Yeah.
changes that they need. At least to an extent, he has given room for advocacy to happen, or at least for things to happen, to say like, okay, some policies are not in line with the new constitution,
Mhm.
or this is not in line, that needs to change, which is very different from how it was
Mhm.
in a previous dispensation, where you knew that the Christianity, religion, and all of these things are going to be used to just get people excited and riled up about
Yeah.
what two consenting adults are doing in their own lives, in their own personal lives. I guess that's where I think people sort of like lose it, where like
Yeah.
somehow everything else can burn and go to the ground. But once we get
Yes.
to what two consenting adults are doing with
Yeah.
their lives, all of a sudden people, okay, I didn't want to swear, people lose all sense, and all of a sudden it's now something that is big, it's an issue. But at least we are seeing some changes currently, and we are not yet
Yeah.
have had major witch hunts, at a government level. But I can't say
Mhm.
that things are changing as fast as I would want them, in
Yeah.
terms of now personal feelings, in terms of like businesses, how they feel towards certain things, who they allow in certain spaces, how they want you to act when you are in their premises. Because I know there are some public spaces like your bars, restaurants and whatnot, that if you're not falling into a stereotypical
Mhm.
heterosexual
Hmm.
narrative or how they feel straight people act, you might be denied entry, and it's
Yeah.
perfectly legal. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's very much
Of
legal
course.
that they might say no,
Yeah.
we're not going to allow queer people in our space, and there's nothing that can be done to them. So at least, I can say now, grassroots going up, some work needs to happen.
Mhm. And
Hmm.
a lot of work still needs to be done, Patrick. I think,
Hmm. Hmm.
not only in Zimbabwe or in Malawi.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
all these countries, especially in Africa,
Hmm.
we look at how something like Christianity, and I think each to their
Uh-huh.
own. Look at how Christianity is so valued, but people
Hmm.
then do go and do such de-Christian things, if there is such a word. But
Yes, yes, yes.
a
Uh-huh.
conversation for another day. Malawi then is
Hmm.
another area that
Hmm.
LGBTQI plus people said
Yeah.
being in a legal battle over
Hmm.
registration, and it looks like same-sex relations are
Uh-huh.
still seen as an unlawful practice. Which
Hmm.
then that is used as an issue to deny the LGBTQI plus people in
Hmm.
Malawi basic human rights, such as
Yeah.
accessing HIV services. What are
Mm.
your views on that?
Like I mentioned earlier on, it is frustrating, it is disheartening, because it seems as if, every time we take a step forward, into the light, somewhere, somehow we go backwards. Because at least, it's like every time another country decriminalizes, homosexuality, others, add new laws to sort of like cement the bigotry,
Yeah.
to cement the all of the hatred that is going on. And I guess I don't know what it is that sometimes, as certain African countries, especially those that profess Christianity as their
Mhm.
main religion, like, we lose senses of, humanity, all for the name of religion, or for the name of
Mhm.
putting across certain morals. But we then forget that at the end of the day, I am human, you are human, I also hurt, you also hurt. If you cut me, I bleed. And yet somehow, in the midst of that, that is thrown out of the window, in favor of something that was imported
Yeah.
onto the continent, because this is
Yeah.
not, it's not an African thing,
It's not.
and there's a certain line that just, came to me from one of my favorite songs from Hosea, where he was like, where he simply like talks about, someone, crying out, in the name of a foreign god, because you're filled with
Mhm.
hate by things that are
Yeah.
not naturally yours, but they're coming from
Mhm.
elsewhere, and they're
Yeah.
made your thing. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, is that who we are? Is that what we are?
Mhm.
Is that what we are as Africans, where, in the name of a religion that technically is
Yeah.
not ours, we then
Yeah.
now forget other people. We forget other people. We forget other people that are part of us. So it's just one of those
Yeah.
where I'm like, these are basic rights, right? But
Mhm.
unfortunately, when it comes to queer issues, when we're now talking about human rights, it's now unfortunately framed within a Western context. Like, somehow every
Mhm.
other thing, when it's being spoken about, gender-based violence and all of that, we quote unquote Africanize it. We own it, we claim it, we want to
Mhm.
change it, we want to deal with it. But now when it comes to now queer issues, human rights all of a sudden become a Western thing.
It's a different ballgame.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's it's
Yeah.
funny. There's
Yeah.
there's there's double standards. Yeah.
Mhm. Go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I thought you wanted to say something. You can say what. Okay. So let me just finish. Just close off. Like,
Yeah.
in
No,
terms
no,
of
no.
like
You were
the
saying double
double
standards, and I
standards that are
wanted
that are there. Like, we are trying to combat, HIV and AIDS on this continent, right? So that we are not
Mhm.
somehow
Mhm.
known as the owners of the disease, and yet
Mhm.
they are now denying, the whole SRHR services to another population that is suffering from it. I guess, I don't know, maybe is it, would they now want to then have this whole thing of like, oh my gosh, look at those queer people, they are the diseased ones, the oversexed ones, like how somehow we keep on being branded. But if you're not denying people those basic services, how can we stay healthy, do what we need to do to protect ourselves when the spaces that are supposed to be now literally inclusive are scary to get
Yeah,
into. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I think what we are lacking, well, it's not a lack really, but I think it is a matter of
Mm-hmm.
it being visible. We lack, African Pride Month, or we lack Pride Month that really focuses on Africa. And I think that in a way would have a different impact. It might sway
Mm-hmm.
some kind of viewpoint or perspective when it comes to, our African leaders, like the ones in Zambia and
Mm-hmm.
Malawi and many other African countries that have
Mm-hmm.
not yet, came to accept and make right when it comes to the LGBTQI plus. In your
Mm-hmm.
view, which month would it be suitable if we were to have an African Pride Month? And what kind of impact do you think it would, African Pride Month would have on different countries?
As for a month, I don't have a particular month that maybe we could just really have it in May, because at least we have Africa Day in May, because we are African at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
There's no matter how much they want to rewrite our identities, we are still African. That cannot be taken away
Mm-hmm.
from us, whether they like it or not, whether they love us or not. It's still
Okay,
a part
right.
of us. So I guess if I'm to choose a month out of all of the 12, it might just be May, for that very reason of like
Mm-hmm.
we spend May celebrating Africanness. We are also African, and this is part and parcel of our heritage, African history. So why
Yeah.
not have our Pride Month in there? And I think one of the things that will also then help during that month is to then start really putting more effort in having localized, indigenous conversations on sexuality, like really reframing sexuality, in terms of our local
Okay.
context. And I think it's something that is still somewhat lacking, because unfortunately a lot of the resources, I'm just going to speak in terms of Zimbabwe, a lot of the resources that we have here that delve into sexuality, talking about it, a lot of it comes from the global north. It is framed in their
Mm-hmm.
understanding of what sexuality is. Even though, yes, research should be and is being done, and I think it is there, but it's just simply not that accessible to say like, all right,
Yeah.
in the era of it, that some leaders these days claim to like, oh no, homosexuality was not there. How were different sexualities navigated? Because I think there is research that's there, or at least there is a book that I've gone through that sort of like tries to dive into some of those things, but unfortunately it's not a book that is inaccessible. Even though the version that I now actually own of the book, it's sort of like a simplified version of it, but it's still
Mm-hmm.
one of those things where like you need to know exactly where to find it. You can't just find it
Yeah.
everywhere unless you are actually in academia, which is just really sad that some of these
It
things
is.
are just now simply reduced to academia, to say like, if you're
Mm-hmm.
not in those spaces, you will not find that research, and it's sad. So maybe during Pride Month, we could really push,
Mm-hmm.
our night to really, really promote indigenous understanding of sexuality, the history that is there, before the colonial era, and also in terms of like our modern understanding of what it is. Because yes, we now have, things that have shifted, cultures have shifted, our understanding of ourselves as Africans have shifted. So those conversations do need to be added as well into like our discussions as queer individuals, in terms of like, as times are shifting, or as Africa is changing, how are we changing with it, so that we might be able to then now deal with the possible dangers that are also coming with, the way that, Africa is, shifting, is becoming more developed. There are risk factors that are in there that we need to be aware of and mitigate, so that we are not now caught unawares again, when things are being shifted or things are being changed. So we need to move somewhat faster than others.
Uh, I'm trying to get V back online.
Okay, okay, okay.
All right, not a problem.
Mhm.
He'll be back on. Sorry.
Sure thing.
Yeah, because he just. Right, let me. Cool stuff.
Hey.
Let's try that again. Patrick, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh
Yes, I
my
can
God,
hear
I
you.
am so sorry. South African network. Ah,
No, it can't
I'm
be
going to
worse
blame
than
load
our
shedding.
network. Okay. Your mic is muted.
My
Your
mic is
mic,
muted. Yes,
yeah.
I was talking a lot. Oh, guys.
No, it
I'm a
is
panic
fine.
mechanic,
The
Patrick.
joys of live
I'm a
broadcast.
panic mechanic. If something goes wrong, everything goes wrong. I
No,
panic a
no,
lot.
no, no. Don't
But
worry about
yeah,
it. These are the fun things about doing live
I,
broadcasts.
I
Anything can
know.
happen.
And you cannot take them back. That is
You
yeah,
can't.
can't
You
take them back.
can't.
But nonetheless,
Yeah.
we're still talking about African Pride Month, and
Hmm.
you were really saying that it should be in May because of
Hmm.
it being Africa. We have Africa Day in May, and
Hmm.
I quite agree with you with that. And you also touched on defining in the African context what sexuality is, and how then in back in the day how they would define it,
Hmm.
because we need
Hmm.
that kind of
Hmm.
reason, because
Hmm.
then the research
Hmm.
that we have, especially in Zimbabwe, it is from the north side of things. So I agree with you in terms of saying that it should be in May. But let's then so in May, should be in May for everyone, because I think everyone in the continent will be then celebrating Africa Day, and
Mm-hmm.
we should now theme it Pride Month. In South Africa, however, our
Mm-hmm.
Pride Month is in October. Actually, I think we have different Pride Months, but I think the biggest Pride Month is in October, because also we have Pretoria Pride, Johannesburg Pride. Currently now in September we had Ekurhuleni Pride. I think we had also Soweto Pride still happening, or it happened I think last week. In February we have Cape Town Pride. But I think our Pride then tend to play at different months, but I think definitely in May. So just before we had that technical, situation,
Mm-hmm.
if you just joined us, welcome. Thank you so much. I'm seeing the love. Let me quickly go to the comments, Patrick, and then read them. Seeing Tiwe says we learning pet live at Pop Games Funny. Thank you so much. I'm Spirit for tuning in. Happy says amazing. Amazing conversation, Patrick. Patrick Mills Mile. Mile. All right, thanks, Happy, for tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
So I want us to then continue the conversation and focus on now, talking about now the things that you do. I think as you have a very huge task, especially when you look and talk about research. I think you have a huge task on your hands, because we need the research done properly, and especially in the context of Africa and in terms of LGBTQI plus. But what has been some of the, or rather, let's start with what kind of research are you currently focusing on, or the research that you've done that has been in your career a highlight, and in which field was it, and what was the focus?
For me, I can say the highlight of my research career was the research that I did for my masters. So I was focused on creative activism and nonviolent action as pathways to social change in Zimbabwe. So it was more of like an activist narrative of, pretty much me just now exploring and just, really diving into those items, but focused on this creative activist organization known as Magamba Network, where I'm currently actually working. But this was before I was working for them. So just looking at the impact that they had in terms of like creative activism and nonviolent action in the country between the period of 2007 to 27, when the organization started, to 2017, when we had that whole dramatic change where the former president was stepped down, and all of the drama that happened there. Because for me, I was trying to sort of like explore and have a discussion where I try to look at it in this framework of like, with the changes that happened in 2017, it was at the forefront, in terms of everything that we then saw in November. It was pretty much like military action, even though now it has been sort of like sanitized and rebranded. But it was the military at the forefront, and then the people at the back that then pushed for that move to happen. So if you just look at that in isolation, it's safe to say you can easily assume that, the SCOs didn't do anything. The advocacy and activism that had been going on in the country, to try to push for, more democratic spaces. You might assume that, oh, it didn't work, because we had military action that then happened there. But then if you then now look at it within the context of all of the work, let's say that 10-year period that I looked at, the work that was being done by various activists, some that really paid the price for their advocacy work in terms of, the forced disappearances and all of those other things. You then now see how that was only possible with all of the things that had
Mhm.
happened, even though, yes, the military quote unquote intervened, but the movement of the people during that time would not have been that big had there not been all of this other groundwork that had been laid down. So I wanted to then explore to say, like, even that groundwork that was done then allowed for that transition to be predominantly violent free, because we have seen, military actions in other countries where one government shifts to the next, but through military intervention, and how things then fall apart during that period, and afterwards. And in our
Mm,
case, even though, let me say something that is, quote unquote, politically incorrect, because there's some people that claim that what happened in 2017 in Zimbabwe is a coup that went to private school. But for me as a Zimbabwean, I'm like,
mm,
it's really more of the work
mm,
that was being done by the activists, trying to push the agenda of nonviolent action to say that it is possible for there to be change. Although now the unfortunate thing,
mm.
nonviolent action takes a while. It really requires a lot of
Yeah.
effort, a lot of groundwork, because I was looking at just simply 10 years of all of the work that they had to do and the work that was done by other activists in 10 years so that we can have some of the things that happened there. But still, there's still more work that needs to be done, and more concise things that need to happen. So for me, doing that research was really quite exciting. I really enjoyed
Hmm.
that. But also, through that research as well, I then sort of then somewhat stepped away from could you give me a second? There's now
Hmm.
noise going on around me because, like I
I
said, we are
got you.
preparing for a festival, so a lot of
I
work
got
is
you.
literally being
I
done. So
got
I
you.
don't know if I'm still being heard over the
You asked
grinding that is
loud
still
and clear.
happening.
I still hear
I'm
you
being
loud
heard.
and
Oh,
clear.
okay, so that is fine. So
Yeah.
the all of the
Yeah.
noises that are going on outside, I'll try to speak louder beyond
Yeah.
above that because I can
Yeah.
hear the noise in the background.
Hmm.
So for me, I'd been an activist for quite a while, and doing advocacy work and everything. But unfortunately, I feel like, a lot of activists, we then fall into this trap where we are taking care of so many things, so many issues, and forget self care. And then we end up, going through burnout and all of that. So for me, in the midst of all of the work that I was doing, doing intensive work in academia and all of the other things that came with it, I then, suffered from burnout because after I produced that thesis, like I really
Hmm.
crushed because not to blow my
Mm.
own horn, but I feel like it was a brilliant piece of work. And I'm glad
Of
the
course.
university also agreed. I
Yeah.
literally graduated with honors, and that was
Yeah.
like pretty much an A plus thesis, like in terms of the grading that I got. But it came at a cost. I
Mm.
literally
Mm.
crashed
I
and
agree
burned
with you. Yeah. I
afterwards,
think, yeah.
where I was
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
it. Like when I finished school, I spent an entire year not able to do anything for myself or for
Mm.
anyone because I was just
Yeah.
done. I was just
Uh,
done.
Yeah,
But to
I've
get into
spoken to a
okay,
few
hmm
I've spoken to a few advocates or
yeah,
activists, both
hmm
from Zimbabwe, one from Uganda, I
hmm
think also one from Kenya and Botswana. And I think they're sharing the same sentiments with you in terms of,
hmm
you give your mind, heart, body, and soul,
hmm
into the work, and then sometimes it really,
hmm
because you have no one to take care of, or what, no one to take care of you, then you burn out,
hmm
or then you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm done. I need to, take a step back and really focus on myself. So I think, the kind
hmm
of work that you guys do is quite important. And I think
hmm
without fail, it is recognized. I want us to then
hmm
differentiate, Ben Patrick, between public
hmm
advocacy and activism. Is there a difference? Or is there a difference? And is the difference then distinct? How do you see it? How do you see that it's there?
All right, for this, I'll have to, pull up some receipts and just read some
Yeah.
certain definitions so that I don't lie to
Hmm.
people. So now, in terms of like advocacy, from what I'm reading, in terms of like all of that, so advocacy encompasses a wide range of activities that
Yeah.
influence decision makers. So advocacy
Hmm.
includes traditional activities such as litigation, lobbying, and public education. It can also include capacity building, relationship building, forming networks, and
Hmm.
leadership development. So when we come to now the whole public advocacy aspect of things, we are now focusing really in terms of like those that are already in power. What
Hmm.
can we do to shift their mindset, or at least to shift policies to be the way that we want? Because the thing with public advocacy, you can really now push it for anything that you want. Because even some of the
Yeah.
lectures that I did was like, where we had some tests where you had to lobby for something that you actually don't believe in personally. because that's also kind of like the dangerous thing about it, where like anyone who has the training that I have, I can, pretty much then be, malicious and now be like, okay, whoever's paying me, I'm gonna push their advocacy. That's why,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of climate change or climate justice issues have been slow, because the people that really generate, funding or funds from, fossil
Mhm.
fuels and all of that have got brilliant public advocacy individuals that then push their agenda in these rooms where decision makers are at. So
Mhm.
I feel like we now need more, queer individuals that identify
Mhm.
as queer to be, in these spaces, to be people that are lobbying and everything. Because I feel like
Yeah.
enough of us are stuck in the activism phase where
Yeah.
we are march. It is brilliant, the whole, we are doing marches, we're going to the grassroots, we're doing the
Mhm.
conscientization, all of that going on. But I feel that we then have a very few queer individuals that are
Mhm.
advocates that are now in
Mhm.
spaces where who are sitting with decision makers. We are
Mhm.
more on the outside trying to change the people that are in power, but sometimes also
Yeah.
we do need to have people that are already that are queer that can now be in the system to say like, fair and fine, this person ain't going anyway. So how can we then influence the other
Mhm.
decision makers that are around them so that their power can be minimized in terms of like, or at
Mhm.
least where we can then input certain things and certain policies so that we can at least have some changes. Because I entered some certain, debates and everything in my class when I was in Ireland. Some other activists and advocates when we were in class, when we were out dealing with some of these things, where I put across that, what, I'm one of those individuals who, if push comes to shove, I am willing to negotiate on rights and all of those things. But people they were coming from, bless their hearts, they had good intentions, but they were now coming from certain countries where a lot of things are already in place, so where you can afford to be extremely hard-headed, where like
Mhm.
it's either you give me this or I'm walking out.
Yeah.
And then I'm
Yeah.
coming from, the global south. I'm in a third world country. We have
Mhm.
got, very economies that have fallen apart. People need to eat, people need to survive. The bread and butter issues, we
Mhm.
can't ignore them. And
Mhm.
then now we are now, because that's how also some certain people in power get away with a lot of things, because they
Yeah.
force us to now be in a place where you are now forced to then negotiate. Like, do I deal with my bread and butter issues, or
Issues
do I
or
deal with like, I need to dress the way that I identify? So let's
mm.
let's let's put it
Mm.
in that context. It might not be like that every time, but let's just put it like that, to say like, no, I need to be able to dress how I feel like
Yeah.
dressing. But then they didn't put the whole issue, and even with some of the people that say that, oh, we are pushing for change and all of that, they feel like these issues are, minor issues. Like, oh no, let's first deal with the big issues of like the economy and all of that. And I was like, we'll continue suffering in that way. But also, I understand that, what, the economy needs to be fixed.
Mhm.
We can't
Mhm.
ignore
It's
it.
a yeah. Yeah.
So
It's a double-edged sword. It's a double
those
for
mental.
me, it's a
It
double-edged
is.
sword because
It
you
is.
can't you at the end of the day
Mm-hmm.
we really need to push
Mm-hmm.
and I guess advocate for the rights of human beings and
Of
like you
human
said, not
beings,
forget the
yes.
issues
Mm-hmm.
of bread and butter, and those are
Mm-hmm.
everyday issues. So how do you then
Yes.
balance the two and make sure that everything
Mm-hmm.
is in equation? I think you sort of in a way answered my next question, which was
Uh-huh.
should we what would be then the cause that we should advocate for? But I think you're
Mm-hmm.
putting it quite blankly on your previous or rather on your previous
Mm-hmm.
response on saying bread and butter issues versus then the larger issues, and you have people who are advocating for different things, like you
Mm-hmm.
in the context that you just given with your the people that you went in class with, that they are coming from a different kind of making, and you are saying, but I am from this third
Mm-hmm.
world country where I understand these issues, and unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
they might not be the same. I want us to
Mm-hmm.
then talk about the cross cultural cooperation that you are doing, and my question
Mm-hmm.
was how. Like I'm interested in how.
Okay.
I'm interested. Yeah.
Uh, all right. So, let me, being a storyteller, I'm just going to tell a little story. on how
Mm-hmm.
I got to that. So for me, I've been a gamer for pretty much most of my life. Because like when I was
Mm-hmm.
5, that's when I actually had my first, gaming machine, which was those
Mm-hmm.
olden day brick games. Even though it was not what I actually really wanted, I wanted an actual Game Boy, but my mother just bought me, a knockoff version of that. And then
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, I then got introduced to Super Mario and all of that. But then it was now when I was like 13 when I owned my first PlayStation. And, 20 years later on, I'm still a PlayStation person. So gaming has really been quite, it's like part of my identity. The same way I,
Yeah.
identify my sexuality, gaming is a part of me. You can't separate gaming from me. So now, for the longest time, I had actually been using gaming as therapy, but not really actually realizing that I'm actually doing that. It was when I then, like, when we got into lockdown and everything that was happening, because for me, gaming made me survive lockdown because I experienced lockdown whilst having to finish a research, doing research, doing a thesis. Imagine going to school during lockdown. That really puts a lot of strain. You're in a foreign country. I'm going through all of the other things that I'm going
Mm-hmm.
through, in a country where my blackness is in people's faces, where in every space I'm entering, I am the other. So I'm dealing with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then gaming saved my life in a lot of spaces in my life. And then it was then that I actually then started really looking closely at the research that was already being done in terms of like using commercial off the counter games but as part of therapy and using gaming as therapy. Because for me, even in a lot of places online, I now literally just have that tag of like gaming is
Mm-hmm.
therapy. So now, in terms of now the whole, cross cultural elements that now come
Yeah.
into it, because for me, it's gaming happens in a lot of spaces, in a lot of different spaces, and there's enough games that are being played that really join in a lot of different people from different places where to an extent, when we're in that game, it doesn't really matter some certain things where we are focused
Yeah.
on a certain goal that we are trying to achieve as a team and everything. And one of the games that really fascinated me the most during lockdown was this PlayStation 4 game called Journey. And literally, as the name suggests, you're literally just making your
On the
way up
journey.
a mountain. You're just simply starting from a certain point and going up a mountain. And as you're going up a mountain, you get to see why the world that you're in, because you start off in a desolate place and you're kind of seeing why that world is dead. And you're kind of making your own decisions. And the beauty of it, if you're playing it online, you can bump into other people that are also making their journey up that mountain. But though you can't actually communicate with the person using words or gestures. You can only just there's a certain button that you'd press that makes a sound. So now for me the beauty of it, trying to use sound to communicate to the other person that you don't even know who they are, where they're coming from, for you to sort of like get into an agreement like, okay, let's go this way. Because I remember one match where there's someone that I met right at the start of the game, and we went throughout that entire mountain. The two of us, we've never met, we've never actually spoken beyond that game, but we could understand each other in the game just simply using sounds to say like, okay, let's go there, let's do this, let's do that. And it was through that that I was now realizing that what, video gaming is such a powerful tool that is being ignored. I will speak from my context, that is being ignored in my country, where it's like, oh no, it's for kids. Oh, this
Mm-hmm.
is not something that is serious, but it's
Mm-hmm.
a multi-billion-dollar industry where a lot of money is poured into it and a lot of research is poured into it in terms of like how they craft the games, how they craft those stories. And for me, I'm trying to tap into that potential within my context and be like, hey guys, let's not lose out on
Yeah.
this. So I've been hosting, some gaming sessions where I can have different people from other places where we sort of like try to find, common ground through gaming,
Mm-hmm.
or at least, for me, trying to make them leave the gaming booth feeling a lot better than how they got into the
Mm-hmm.
space. So for me, it's still like something that I'm exploring, something that I'm unpacking, because I feel like it's a fascinating piece of research. And I'm glad that there are now, some certain institutions that now seem to be excited about it. Because even like with the festival that is happening at my workplace, I actually have a gaming booth that's gonna be open,
Mhm.
and it's like I actually applied for a small grant and I got given by the Zimbabwe German Society, to just have that gaming booth that is focused on, mental wellness through video gaming. And for me, I think it is necessary, because as an activist, I'm now really sort of like going down that path, or at least as a researcher, going down that path where I'm now just localizing my work around gaming. And even when it comes to issues to do with sexual orientation and everything, kind of now
Mhm.
looking at some of those games to say like which games actually have sort of
Yeah.
like positive views of like queer individuals, where we're not overly sexualized, or we're not just simply a plot device that is just pushing forward the story of someone else. But there are some games that
Mhm.
do fascinating work on that. And also for me, I enjoy games that allow me to create my own character. And I feel a
Yeah.
lot of, queer individuals need to have access to those games that allow you to create that person that you want, so that you can identify the way that you want. Because I know there's enough, trans individuals, even in here in Zim, that don't have the freedom to actually then be who they want to be, because of laws that are in place that prevent them to dress how they identify, to be how they truly identify. But at least through gaming, you can actually safely do that, because you'll be in an environment where you can do that safely, where no one to an extent really cares. But there are some toxic elements in some toxic
Mhm.
gaming
Mhm.
communities, but I'm trying to push safer spaces where you
Most
can be
definitely.
queer or
Yeah.
non-queer, but we are joined together to just, we are gamers and we are doing this. So at least
Yeah.
slowly but surely it's getting there. But I know I'm going to have to deal with a lot of toxic elements, because unfortunately
Yeah.
enough of the gaming community in my country is quite homophobic. And
Mm.
I feel like it's a borrowed homophobia, because that's how they
Mhm.
see the enough of the global north gaming communities are, and then them for just, shits and giggles. It
Yeah.
just happens that way. And I was like, no, you
Yeah.
don't have to
I got
borrow
you.
some of these things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I've got you. It sounds interesting. I think you've summed up the other question to say then it needs to be that. That would be the
Mhm.
goal, that it needs to be a space that I think it's less toxic and less homophobic, and it,
Mhm.
it really builds mental health. And as an advocate, that's also
Mhm.
another layer that we're adding there. Listen, Patrick, I've thoroughly
Mhm.
enjoyed this. I wanted us to go through an hour, but I know you have other things to do. But I appreciate the time that you've given to us. Don't be a stranger to the platform. Whatever you do, whatever, even if it's just a little research, and you think,
Mhm.
it is quite, having a topic over, we're
Mhm.
here for that. Most definitely welcome to do so. Good luck for today, for work, and thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome, and thank you for having me. I absolutely enjoyed this. It was a fascinating discussion. I don't get to do this enough. So
Yeah,
thank you so much for that opportunity that you gave me to
yeah,
have this dialogue.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. All righty. All right, Patrick. Thank you. We'll see you on the next one, and happy Friday. All right. That
Bye.
is Patrick Miller joining us all the way from Zimbabwe. We had a little bit of a technical issue there with load shedding. This load shedding business. Nonetheless, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Make sure that you follow them on social media, and also follow us. www.popin.org gives you the behind the scenes, and also on other social media platforms. It is at n_health and at pop in. My name is Nkosi, and for myself and the Usupa producer, we have Phaleng. We will see you next week, Monday, where we'll be broadcasting live. Until then, now the network is doing other things with you, because I just said load sharing. Wow. But until then, I'm going to see you on Monday. Happy streaming. Bye.